Good morning and welcome to Jasiri on a Tuesday. And today we're holding space for two stories that may seem worlds apart but are connected by a thread we don't talk about nearly enough. What happens when people, especially young people, are left behind? Today we focus on the escalating crisis of youth gangs. Yes, you heard that right. Youth gangs, where a kind of abandonment plays out on a daily basis. All right, so no jobs, no future, and then no supervision where children are concerned, just violence, a kinship that's made on the streets and defines survival. When the family breaks down, when systems fail and silence replaces support, young people don't disappear. They just look for power and belonging wherever they can find it. But first.
I'm back again. I have to acknowledge I'm
Be a boss today. It's not today's job.
So recently, a deeply personal thread went viral, one that pulled at heartstrings and stirred serious questions about parenthood, gender roles, and emotional labor. We've had similar conversations before, like the one about a mother who left her kids behind in the UK after her husband said he wanted a divorce. But this time, it's a father's story. In a post that has since sparked intense reactions, at Victor Drane, I think, shared how a wife left home 10 years ago. No fighting, no warning, just a casual, I'm going to see my sister in Abuja. So we're still not sure if he's telling the story or if this is the story being told through him. He says, the lady said, I'm going to see my sister in Abuja, and she never came back. It was later discovered that she had left the country and that her entire family knew, but no one said a word. He wrote, that day I became both father and mother overnight. And let me tell you, it wasn't easy. He spoke of sleepless nights, sick children, silent tears, and the weight of carrying it all alone while society assumed he'd be fine because, well, he's a man. No, I think it's because he's their father. She left 3 children, the youngest just a year and 6 months old at the time.
Sorry, I'm so rattled. He asked, what role does a father play when he has to do it all? What role does pain play when there's no one to share it with? And just when you think the story ends there, it takes another turn. This year in April, she returned. Not to reconnect, not to explain, but to take the children and move them abroad. He said no. Now he's being called selfish, wicked, for choosing to protect the children he raised alone. So where do gender expectations end and emotional accountability begins? And who really gets to decide what's best for the children when one parent bore the full cost of being present? Let's take a look at some of the reactions first.
What did you do to make her leave? Please allow these innocent children have access to a better life. Don't poison their mind against their mother.
Hey, Jesus.
Hold on. You must have done something to trigger her disappearance. Leaving the kids to you, the father, shouldn't be a problem. Taking care of your kids is your responsibility, man, and giving them chance to a better life in abroad is a good and wise decision you should make as a man. After all, she's still their mother and nothing can change that. Wow.
That's a woman, eh?
For the sake of the children, please let them go abroad. The children know who matters at the end of the day. It's not your battle, but theirs. They will use her to climb and favor you for the price you paid.
Wow. And this is a man.
Things men do and get applaud for. Women are doing it now. Y'all are crying. I love me a woman. A woman in man's domination. It's supposed to be a woman in male-dominated fields. That's the trend. Yeah. It's time to tell us what you did to her, and it's your duty as a man to fight for your children's future. Let them follow their mother to a better country. What? My bro, you have done nothing wrong by standing on your ground. She's even lucky to be bargaining this with you. I wouldn't have listened to her at all. No matter what happened between herself and her husband, she has no right to come back for the kids after 10 years. If she wasn't happy in the marriage, or if the man had done something really bad to her, it was best to file for divorce and discuss the welfare of the kids rather than taking off the way she did. Ladies, wow. The family knew. Part of it that is also on the thread is that she has sent thugs and threatened him for him not being willing to release the kids for them to follow her back to wherever she came from the abroad. I have so many issues, so many issues. I do agree that, you know, in some instances people are saying, what did you do to her? Because I would hope that it still takes a lot for a mother to leave 3 children behind. Her family knew.
Yeah.
I wonder what the family's role in raising the kids or helping him was, given that their daughter was away.
Yeah.
Did she ever try to send anything? There was never any. It's just it's a mess.
Yes, a mess.
It's an incomplete story
Yes.
to me, because we've only heard it from one side. And I know that when it comes to men, a lot of people tend to treat them a little differently, but this is, in fairness to us, this is things women have done over the years, where children are abandoned and a woman has to pick up the pieces.
Yeah.
But because it's a flip script, but what I need to know is that something really did happen. For her to take off like that, I really need to hear another side of the story.
All right, so
To be able to make sense of it. Because if she has, once she has a family, the family take part in the upbringing of the children. If she did live, what role did the family, did they explain? Would they have come to ask where she was?
When they go to check their grandchildren,
their children,
their cousins, their niece and nephews.
Yeah, we need to, it
that
seems
there's
incomplete.
no clear second part of it.
Yeah.
Like, we can't hear the story. Let's try and put the pieces together for ourselves if we're not privy or privileged to know what happened from the woman's perspective. There is no justification.
No excuse.
None.
If it's not a violent relationship,
There's none. Because if it's a
just
violent
kinda
relationship,
weird.
you look for a way to remove your children. Uproot them
let
from
me,
Yes,
let's not
and
even say
that-
violent, abusive,
Yes,
because
yes.
there's different forms of abuse that are not
abuse.
always violent.
Yes.
Abusive, yes.
She probably would not have left her children in
you
such a
wouldn't,
space.
you wouldn't leave your children in that space. And then you leave, and the children are pretty young, and the youngest is not even
1 year,
up to
up to
now they'll be
2
around
months.
11.
And then you leave for 10 years. Okay, you wanted a better life. There is something called communication. That's why people say the people who get into relationships that result in marriages these days lack communication. You could have sat down, had a conversation with your spouse. If it's not working, it's fine. It's not going to kill you. But you disappear for 10 years. And I think the way he said it, that everybody else knew but him. He only found out through a colleague of hers that said she's not in Abuja, she's not even in the country. She has just upped and left. Imagine the man's shock.
And do you know that what it would have taken to put the papers and everything together?
And everything together.
The
while
plan
he
was in
leaves.
place for months.
Now you want to, please, let's be honest. There are women who are badly behaved. We
Yeah,
sit on
I
this
know.
table and say there are some
I've
women
heard
that
of
shouldn't
women like
be
that.
mothers. But unfortunately, it is what it is. Now you're resorting to allegedly using thugs and force
And
by
get-
force
to get the
get the children. So what?
And the children don't want to go with her.
And they don't want to go with
They don't
you.
recognize
don't
her as
know
their
her.
mother.
Why don't you focus on
Building a
rebuilding
relationship.
rebuilding a relationship with the children? Get them, sit them down and give them an explanation that makes them you are their mother, no one's taking that away from you. But you don't need to come and institute yourself as the queen of their lives. It's not possible. You have to
So,
earn
you
it.
know something? You said you're their mother. Nobody's taking that away from you. But funny enough, I disagree. She's their mother by blood.
Yeah.
But in terms of raising
Nurture.
them,
You
she
didn't
made the
raise them.
No, she
decision
didn't.
not to be the mother that raised them.
Yes.
So she has taken that away. And it's an audacity and a level of, I'm looking for the word I can't find, and a level of something that allows you to think because you gave birth to them,
you have
and they're
the right.
related to you by blood, and you left them after 10 years, none of that should matter. And then for the people who are saying that he's being selfish and wicked for refusing to take them abroad, where does he know she's based abroad? What does he know that she's doing in the abroad? What if she's married to somebody he doesn't know? What if she's doing all these menial jobs? Why is she intent? I know that because they're probably underage, you need to get your kids in before they're 18 if you want to file, depending on the country. But there are too many questions. You're not even trying to explain to him. You're not trying to show him, okay, this is what I want to do with the kids abroad. You just want to say, I'm their mother.
That's where me.
What if one of them had died while you were away? What would you be saying then?
What me I say about gender? That's why I tell people. I say sometimes we need to think in human terms, not based on gender. Bad behavior is bad behavior. We condemn it when men do it.
Yes.
So we should condemn it when a woman does it.
Absolutely.
You can't just up and go. The emotional toll it takes on the entire, even before the father could get himself together to be able to, give himself to his children, it takes a while. Just like it takes a while for a woman too, that a man just ups and leaves.
The children may not even know her anymore. Imagine the youngest that was barely 18 months when she left. You come back and say, hi,
she doesn't even remember him.
And the child is looking at you like, and then looking at the older siblings like for confirmation. What's she saying? My mother, okay.
And in 10 years, you could not communicate, you could not try to see the children, you could not even send word to the father that, I'm sorry, this was what happened at that time. Maybe she was mentally imbalanced. Even whatever life she wants to take, maybe she will say it's a mental health, she's schizophrenic, she needed higher drugs and better medication, and in 10 years she has come out from a psychiatric hospital. There's so many strange things that can happen.
So I understand what Lola is trying to do. It's because the story has gaps.
I'm feeling it because I need to put something.
But you know, sometimes I had a recent conversation with somebody. I said, this search for answers and closure, sometimes the answer you get will actually piss you off even more because it doesn't make sense. So sometimes don't change. Let's not chase the closure. Let's chase the actions that she has demonstrated.
But even her family,
without telling anybody, without telling your husband, your family knew, you're gone for 10 years, you come back to try and claim children that don't know you and say you want to take them abroad, and now you're threatening someone. I hope he gets the legal system involved. The kind of woman who's acting like someone, she may have done passports for them, and forged it, and she could actually try to take these kids off the street and run with them. For someone who disappears for 10 years,
she might even take the kids now,
10 years
and this man would never
doesn't know you.
Will never see them again.
I've seen someone who did that. She went to school. In fact, a personal friend. She had the baby when she was like in late secondary school. So she took like 2 years. She couldn't go into uni. So when she now eventually 2 years after, when she found uni to get in, she now took the baby back to the father. That please, could you take the baby while I go to school? I'll come get when I'm on breaks. Tolu, she has not seen that child since. She didn't see that child for more than maybe 18 years.
I'm sorry?
Was it up to 18 years? Let's say 15 years. It was when the man heard she was going to be married. He now put a call. That means he knew her phone number.
He's kept it.
He's kept tabs on her.
In this same Nigeria.
This Nigeria I'm talking to you. I don't even think she physically has seen the child. She has gone on to marry and have other children.
No, hold on.
He called to say what?
Exactly.
He called to let the boy speak to her.
In this situation, where are the police? Where are the security agents? This story
know
is
where
saying,
she is.
you know that the MD sent us a story as well. A man who has kidnapped, for lack of a better word. There's something called parental kidnapping. Just because you're the parent doesn't mean you have the right to take that child. There's parental abduction and parental kidnapping. And he has taken I think 2 boys or 2 or 3 boys, and the woman has been losing her mind looking for her kids. They've gone to put.
So listen,
it's too hard. Some of these stories are weird, and it defies logical reasoning.
That's why we're trying to fill in the gaps.
Yeah, looking for. I want to know what the excuse was that she could just to me. I would die. I don't even think I can. I've had chances of relocating without my children. I did not take the option.
We talked about it recently.
Yes.
I don't know how am I going to let go of my daughter when she turns 18?
Yeah, like if Coco turns 18 and she wants to go abroad,
struggling in advance.
It's either we would opt and go with her. Then I doubt if she can leave.
3 children. Listen, it takes a different set of balls to be able
to do it. I can't.
People say, you too.
Maybe stresses me out. He's the only one that has not been at home. Do you know that if they don't let my boy come home this week, I will go and get my son from their school. And it's not like he's far away. He's not doing something.
And it's not like you can't talk to him.
No, I just want my son
around you.
I've been cooking, nesting. Like, where are my children?
So this
there must be gaps.
Maternal.
We are giving out benefit of doubt.
So that's what we are saying.
That there must be something.
It takes a different set of balls, and those balls are not gendered.
They're not gendered.
No, it's not. No.
Wow, interesting things. I tell you, if you don't watch Jasiri, I do not know what you're using your mid-morning to do. But we'll be taking a break now. But before then, the numbers are grim, and the reality is even harder to process. Hundreds dead, communities living in fear, and a generation of young people caught between violence and neglect. This isn't just a crime issue, it's a governance issue. It's an economic issue. It's a national identity issue. When we do come back, we'll dig deeper with Cheta Nwanze into the political connections, the failure of the justice system, and the uncomfortable question, is the state losing control of its streets or quietly, benefiting from the chaos? This conversation is going to be interesting. Do stay with us.
This is Jasiri, where we don't just react to the headlines, we interrogate the systems that produce them. Recently, we focused our spotlight on Mushin, one of Lagos's most densely populated and historically resilient communities. But in recent weeks, it's been making news for all the wrong reasons. Renewed cult violence, arrest, grieving families, a community under siege again. This isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a disturbing national trend, the rise of urban violence, youth disaffection, and the blurring lines between poverty, politics, and criminal networks. From Lagos to Benin, Warri to Port Harcourt, Nigeria's cities are witnessing a disturbing trend, the rise and deadly resilience, of youth gangs. What started as campus cults have now evolved into brutal underworld empires, claiming lives, extorting communities, and exploiting every crack in our economic and political system. SBM Intelligence's latest report, Gangsters Paradise, paints a harrowing picture. Over 1,600 deaths in 900-plus incidents between 2020 and 2025. The data points to a crisis hiding in plain sight, one that has infiltrated our elections, our streets, and even our sense of safety. Joining us now is someone who spent years making sense of Nigeria's chaos through data. Cheta Nwanze, partner at SBM Intelligence, and today we ask who profits from the violence? Why hasn't the state and its interventions worked? And how do we stop a crisis that is quietly becoming a storm? Cheta, it's good to see you again. Welcome back to Jasiri.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
All right, so Cheta, we spoke about the violence in Mushin just last week here on the show. We highlighted the death of a 10-year-old, Wasiu Eyingold, who was killed in the crossfire between rival gangs. Unfortunately, Mushin has long been labeled a flashpoint for violence, and many point to entrenched historical and socio-economic factors. Now, SBM's report opens by describing Nigeria as a gangster's paradise. So what makes Nigeria, and particularly its southern states, so fertile for gang activity today?
Do we start this PhD business? I think so. It's a complex factor, complex combination of economic despair, political exploitation, and history. So, economic despair. We have 53% thereabouts youth unemployment, and so many people graduate from school, and we're talking of not just university, secondary school, and they have nothing to do. Remember the old maxim, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. It holds very true here. And then you now have people who are apparently involved in criminal activities, and they never get punished. As a matter of fact, they get rewarded by society, they get adulated by society. So it becomes tempting. And then as it went on, so maybe it's time to trace some of the history. We had campus confraternities formed in the 60s. Most famously, the pirate confraternity formed by Wole Soyinka in the University of Ibadan. Now, when they were formed, these fraternities, as it were, they were fraternities at first, modeled after the American frat system, used to attract the best of the best in terms of, they were elite clubs, so they were clubs meant for the best. Yeah. But somewhere in the middle of the 70s, a guy called Kekere, I think, I forget the name, had a falling out. He tried to get admitted into the Pirates, and he was deemed not good enough. So that's the maximum of if they tell you that you are not, if they tell you that you can't have dinner at the table, go and build your own table. So he went to start his own fraternity. And this is where Eye was born. And as time went on, other fraternities came up. So we ended up having Black Arts, which has become probably the most prominent of all of them. And over time, especially during the Babangida regime, the governments found them useful. Criminal elements began to infiltrate. The government found them useful in disrupting campuses. Remember that university campuses were a very, very major hotbed for resistance to the military governments. Yeah. So the Babangida government found it useful to basically finance these guys to disrupt the campuses. And that's essentially how the criminality began to really pervade into the whole thing. And it just got worse from there. It was downhill. Again, I think the key thing has become the fact that impunity, and it's a trait that is common around Nigeria generally, in terms of our, because a lot of people do all sorts of things and get away with it.
Yes.
What incentive do you have for people not to do it? Think of the incident in Mushin last week. Has anybody been caught? Has anybody been arrested? If somebody is arrested, will they be prosecuted? Will they be sent to prison? Or will a call come from some patron, and the whole thing will just die? Or will it be stuck in legal limbo forever? These are questions that are very uncomfortable, but are basically a
necessary
mindset or a window into what our society has become. And for the record, yes, Tolu, at the intro, you said 1,600 deaths. It's more than 1,686.
Wow.
86 people is 86 people too many. 1,686 people is 1,686 people too many.
Absolutely.
But these are the deaths that we're able to verify in compiling the reports.
Cheta, thank you so much for that expansion. So many times we point poverty as an overwhelming factor that makes some of these social vices to fester. However, the report challenges the common belief that poverty alone drives gang violence. Can you help us unpack what SBM found about urban economic activity and tough wars that fuel some of these crises? Because initially, everybody, the omnibus problem we usually would put under this is poverty.
Yeah.
But now that you have found some other, prevalent factors that, can trump poverty, can you expatiate on that a little for us?
Okay, thank you for this. It's very easy to blame poverty alone. Poverty definitely provides the fertile ground for recruitment, because poverty breeds despair. And when people live in despair, they want a way out. And let's not forget that our country, very unfortunately, has the highest number of absolutely poor people in the world. Now, there's a difference between rural poverty and urban poverty. And urban poverty is the real killer here, is the real cause of this. Urban poverty has a very grinding effect on the mentality of people who are going through it, especially given the fact that they are exposed to a lot of the razzmatazz, the glitz of wealth. So when you now have a society that essentially creates incentives. So, for example, illegal taxation, which is a problem, especially here in Lagos. You find that many of these gangs are involved in extortion of bus drivers. They tend to be involved in this kind of activity, and they remit the money somewhere. So over time, it becomes embedded in the system, and it becomes like cultural, and it becomes, I think the key thing here is it becomes the only way out. Now, we found evidence, and there have been a lot of other reports by other organizations, most notably by Human Rights Watch. I always refer to that old report that Human Rights Watch did in 2009, which they called Politics as War. where they laid out in River State the various gangs, Dibam, Vikings, Icelanders, being sponsored by politicians to specifically for election purposes. So that is an incentive. Politicians come, give these people guns, so that they would force people to go and they will force people to vote in a particular way, or they would basically to force election results. And then after the election, the politicians have gotten what they want, which is they've won the elections, they've been sworn into office. They don't bother to take away the guns.
Exactly.
But crucially, at that point, they stop funding these gangs. At that point. And the gangs have weapons, but they also have a means, an incentive, to make money. So it's a toxic mix. They have the weapons, and they don't have an income. Weapons, no income, and unmotivated police force somewhere. The outcome is quite logical.
The outcome is what we see. Absolutely.
Yes.
And from the reports we gathered, particularly Lagos, Rivers, and River States and Edo State have been the states most hit or most impacted, I beg your pardon, in regards to this urban warfare or urban gang landscape. But Cheta, before we go into more questions, because there's even the evolution, I don't know if many people are aware that some of these gangs have taken their activities outside of Nigeria. Italy is one example that they've actually set up a task force. Yes, Italy is an example. Dubai is a place too. I know in Italy there are actually gang clashes on the streets of Italy that are clashes of gangs from Nigeria. But we'll pick up on that part of the conversation after the break. Cheta, let's take this quick break, and then we'll look at the movements from traditional campus cults to the spillover and what it tells us about their evolution. Let's talk after this. Stay with us. You're watching Jasiri, and the conversation today is on the evolution of campus cults to urban warfare and what it means here in Nigeria. And just off the break, we were talking, Kaplan has made mention of the fact that there was an attempt by Nigerian university gangs to take foothold in Belgium, but they were repelled. But Italy is one of the countries rather, that has not had an opportunity to repel them. Cheta, we've seen movements of what has been traditional campus cult groups to them spilling out into communities and on our streets. Gangs like Aya and Aye, and of course the Vikings, which originated on university campuses, but now they're running state-level empires. With reports also saying that they've branched out internationally. The one in Italy particularly caught my attention because these gangs were vying with the traditional Italian mafia for control of prostitution and drug running in Italy. They actually had to set up a task force to identify individuals who had ties to these cult groups back in Nigeria and start looking for ways to get them under control in Italy. But focusing on the local situation, I think that's just important that we note. What does their evolution tell us about how Nigeria's social institutions have failed? And what does their spillover into the international scene also highlight for us?
So, I mean, there's no question that social institutions in Nigeria have failed. And, pardon me?
Please go ahead, Cheta.
Yeah, there's no question that social institutions in Nigeria have failed. I would go so far as to, very unfortunately, and I've been saying this since 2011, that Nigeria is a failed state. What that failure has done is it has created opportunities for all sorts of people. And I think Nigeria has so many fundamental failures, but the most fundamental is the failure of the rule of law. So when people can do nonsense and get away with it, then it gives every incentive for others looking behind them or coming behind them to do nonsense. So over time, now there are certain criminal activities that no matter how sane a society is, they will be there at some very, even if it's at an infinitesimal level, they are there somewhere. So prostitution is one of them, drug trafficking, cybercrime, extortion, and then that's extortion, usually what some people will call protection rackets.
Yeah.
And then in Nigeria, we now add politically motivated violence to the mix. So what happened was that over time, these gangs, as they evolved, began to see opportunities to get involved in these things. Again, because they were getting sponsorship from politicians, like we explained in the last segment. And then after the elections, they will be left to their devices. They needed to keep the money flowing, because at the end of the day, it's all about money, which buys power. So especially between after the return to democracy in 1999, post 1999, there was a push in a lot of university campuses, because remember, during the Abacha years, on-campus violence was particularly gruesome. There was an incident in Unilag in 1998, 97 or 98, where 26 people were killed in Unilag. I remember in Uniben standing at the custody gates and seeing somebody shot. And by the end of that evening, 7 people had been killed. It was a gang war. So there was a push by the CVCs, the Committee of Vice Chancellors, starting about 2002, to really come down on campus calls, the campus gangs. And the result of that, the inadvertent result, and this is one of the things that happens when you are basically walking in silos. Nigerian, the CVC was doing something, but it wasn't really in concert with the police. So what happened was, when the recruitment pipeline on campus was throttled, it wasn't entirely cut off, but it was throttled. Many of these gangs began to recruit from outside campuses. They started going lower down the food chain. So you began to see people see people being recruited when they were still in secondary school, and they no longer discriminated in recruitment. They were now recruiting anybody who was willing. So that was how it spread. It became an area thing, no longer just the campus thing. And from there, it was a case of opportunity meets preparedness. So there were all sorts of little vices that the opportunity to monetize them existed. And naturally, the people who had the weapons came on board and did that. That's basically the move. And again, we keep coming back to that talk of impunity. They were able to do it repeatedly, nothing happened. So, of course, they keep doing it, and it becomes more attractive to people. And all of this so think about it this way. The problem had always been there, but it's only in the last 10 years thereabouts that it has really exploded and become an international problem. What happened? Economy collapsed. So while the problem had always been there, it was on a sort of level, but at some point, the whole thing now just started to rise exponentially, coinciding with rising unemployment, rising number of people in absolute poverty, the general drop in living standards, and rising inflation. Essentially, they remit the money somewhere. So over time, it becomes embedded in the system, and it becomes like cultural, and it becomes, I think the key thing here is it becomes the only way out. Now, we've found evidence, and there have been a lot of other reports by other organizations, most notably by Human Rights Watch. I always refer to that old report that Human Rights Watch did in 2009, which they called Politics as War, where they laid out in Rivers State the various gangs, Dibam, Vikings, Icelanders, being sponsored by politicians specifically for election purposes. So that is an incentive. Politicians come, give these people guns, so that they would force people to go and they will force people to vote in a particular way, or they will basically to force election results. And then after the election, the politicians have gotten what they want, which is they've won the elections, they've been sworn into office. They don't bother to take away the guns.
Exactly.
But crucially, at that point, they stop funding these gangs. At that point. And the gangs have weapons, but they also have a means, an incentive, to make money. So it's a toxic mix. They have the weapons, and they don't have an income. Weapons, no income, and unmotivated police force somewhere. The outcome is quite logical.
The outcome is what we see.
Unfortunately.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And from the reports we gathered, particularly Lagos, Rivers, and River states and Edo State have been the states most hit or most impacted, I beg your pardon, in regards to this urban warfare or urban gang landscape. But Cheta, before we go into more questions, because there's even the evolution, I don't know if many people are aware that some of these gangs have taken their activities outside of Nigeria. Italy is one example that they've actually set up a task force. Yes, Italy is an example. Dubai is a place too. I know in Italy there are actually gang clashes on the streets of Italy that are clashes of gangs from Nigeria. But we'll pick up on that part of the conversation after the break. Cheta, let's take this quick break, and then we'll look at the movement from traditional campus cults to the spillover and what it tells us about their evolution. Let's talk after this. Stay with us. You're watching Jasiri, and the conversation today is on the evolution of campus cults to urban warfare and what it means here in Nigeria. And just off the break, we were talking. Catherine has made mention of the fact that there was an attempt by Nigerian university gangs to take foothold in Belgium, but they were repelled. But Italy is one of the countries rather, that has not had an opportunity to repel them. Cheta, we've seen movements of what has been traditional campus cult groups to then spilling out into communities and on our streets. Gangs like Aya and Aye, and of course the Vikings, which originated on university campuses, but now they're running state-level empires, with reports also saying that they've branched out internationally. The one in Italy particularly caught my attention because these gangs were vying with the traditional Italian mafia for control of prostitution and drug running in Italy. They actually had to set up a task force to identify individuals who had ties to these cult groups back in Nigeria and start looking for ways to get them under control in Italy. But focusing on the local situation, I think that's just important that we note. What is their evolution? Tell us about how Nigeria's social institutions have failed. And what does their spillover into the international scene also highlight for us?
So, I mean, there's no question that social institutions in Nigeria have failed. And, pardon me?
Please go ahead, Cheta.
Yeah, there's no question that social institutions in Nigeria have failed. I would go so far as to, very unfortunately, and I've been saying this since 2011, that Nigeria is a failed state. What that failure has done is it has created opportunities for all sorts of people. And I think Nigeria has so many fundamental failures, but the most fundamental is the failure of the rule of law. So when people can do nonsense and get away with it, then it gives every incentive for others looking behind them or coming behind them to do nonsense. So over time, now there are certain criminal activities that no matter how sane a society is, they will be there at some very, even if it's at an infinitesimal level, they are there somewhere. So prostitution is one of them, drug trafficking, cybercrime, extortion, and then that's extortion, usually what some people will call protection rackets.
Yeah.
And then in Nigeria, we now add politically motivated violence to the mix. So what happened was that over time, these gangs, as they evolved, began to see opportunities to get involved in these things. Again, because they were getting sponsorship from politicians, like we explained in the last segment. And then after the elections, they will be left to their devices. They needed to keep the money flowing, because at the end of the day, it's all about money, which buys power. So especially between after the return to democracy in 1999, post-1999, there was a push in a lot of university campuses, because remember, during the Abacha years, on-campus violence was particularly gruesome. There was an incident in Unilag in 1998, 97 or 98, where 26 people were killed in Unilag. I remember in Uniben standing at the custody gates and seeing somebody shot. And by the end of that evening, 7 people had been killed. It was a gang war. So there was a push by by the CVCs, the Committee of Vice Chancellors, starting about 2002, to really come down on campus calls, the campus gangs. And the result of that, the inadvertent result, and this is one of the things that happens when you are basically walking in silos. Nigerian, the CVC was doing something, but it wasn't really in concert with the police. So what happened was, when the recruitment pipeline on campus was throttled, it wasn't entirely cut off, but it was throttled. Many of these gangs began to recruit from outside campuses. They started going lower down the food chain. So you began to see people see people being recruited when they were still in secondary school, and they no longer discriminated in recruitment. They were now recruiting anybody who was willing. So that was how it spread. It became an area thing. No longer just a campus thing. And from there, it was a case of opportunity meets preparedness. So there were all sorts of little vices that the opportunity to monetize them existed. And naturally, the people who had the weapons came on board and did that. That's basically the move. And again, we keep coming back to that talk of impunity. They were able to do it repeatedly, nothing happened. So, of course, they keep doing it, and it becomes more attractive to people. And all of this so think about it this way. The problem had always been there, but it's only in the last 10 years thereabouts that it has really exploded and become an international problem. What happened? Economy collapsed. So while the problem had always been there, it was on a sort of level, but at some point, the whole thing now just started to rise exponentially, coinciding with rising unemployment, rising number of people in absolute poverty, the general drop in living standards, and rising inflation. Essentially, it's a cry for help. That's what it is.
I don't think the family of the dead will tell you it's a cry for help, Cheta.
You know, it's just, you know what, and just listening to you talk about the evolution, you know, it just makes us feel as if the government has failed us completely as a people. While much of this violence between gangs is framed as tough, you know, warfare or rival clashes, the reality on ground tells a more tragic story. And increasingly, it's not just gang members who are dying, it's market women, school kids, bus drivers, and children in their own homes. You know, these so-called unwritten rules about protecting civilians are breaking down, and the entire communities are now living in fear. So what happens when the violence spills beyond the gangs? What does it mean for public trust, for law enforcement, and for the concept of safety? Cheta Nwanze, who is partner of SBN Intelligence, is still with us as we look at this from campus calls to tough wars to Nigeria's deadly evolution. Cheta, thank you for being with us. While most of these victims are rival gang members, civilians, especially in Rivers, Edo, and Lagos, are increasingly caught in the crossfire. The report references unwritten rules about not targeting non-combatants, but these rules aren't always followed. What are we seeing? Why are we seeing that shift? Because sometimes these gangs, they follow a pattern that, okay, they do not want civilian casualties. Yeah. But now, even civilians are becoming their targets. It's as if somebody can just go and recruit them to just target a civilian and get rid of someone. How are we supposed to navigate these unwritten rules that seems to even be defying our own security agencies here?
Yeah.
So again, I mean, I've used this word probably 4 or 5 times since we started this conversation: impunity. So initially there was a convention. Of course, it's not now whether these gangs have written constitutions is something that we will never know. But there was a convention that they did not target civilians. I'll give an example. again from Uniben in 2003, a gang leader, Vincent Udoho, was killed. He was a final year medical student and he was writing his finals. And people in a rival gang knew that that was the only opportunity they had to get him. So they went into the exam hall and singled him out, dragged him out of the class, and killed him in the presence of his classmates.
Wow.
Now, when that happened, they took special care to find him, to also isolate his bodyguards and disable those first. Essentially, they killed triple that day, his two bodyguards and Vincent himself. But they took special care to find their targets. This was in 2003, 22 years ago. Since then, because of that impunity, coming back to that word, because of the impunity and the failure to bring people to justice, it's easier. So, for example, going back to that 2003 incident that I mentioned, it would have been a lot easier knowing that he would be there to just go in there with a machine gun and spray the class, know that they would likely get him and get out. But that care, and I hate that I have to use the word care, but it's the only word that comes to mind, that care to pick out the specific targets that used to exist in the past is no longer there.
Yeah.
And a case can be made, whether you agree with the case or not, a case can be made that it has come with the quote unquote, the dumbing down of the intake in the gangs. Again, when they started and before they metastasized into law-breaking entities, they used to be very exclusive in picking their recruits. But now anybody who is willing is picked out. So these are the things that have helped. So with all due respect to Mushin, for example, and this is they're speaking with the knowledge that over the years some genuine gems have come out of Mushin.
Yeah.
But in terms of averages, you wouldn't say that Mushin has the sharpest tools in the shed generally spread around. So it is more likely that in a place like Mushin, and again, given that there's the history of the fact that unfortunately our government just doesn't care, as long as it's not in a big man's area, they really don't care what happens. So it's easier for them to just open fire at random and without any care in the world as who they hit, because they know that nothing will happen.
And you're not...
They wanted to get someone in Banana Island, as an example. They will take more care. For the simple fact that you don't start shooting at random in Banana Island, because there will be
repercussions.
There will be a reaction.
Yes.
The people who live in Banana Island will call ministers, they will call governors, and they will ask, what is happening? Do something. But people in Mushin do not have a voice.
Yeah.
And you consider, as an example, when the Lekki massacre happened in 2020, because of the location of where it happened, it made international news. But people always forget that on the same day, in the same Mushin that we're talking about, the military and the police also killed people. It's never mentioned.
Cheta, let me pick up on that, because I want us to talk about guns, gangs, and geography now. And we've sort of highlighted the fact that location matters, and they too will think about how they behave in different locations. But this is about the states. Lagos has the highest number of incidents, but Rivers leads in fatalities. Even with incidents, Rivers has more people dying in this gang warfare than others. Gangs in Rivers reportedly use sophisticated weapons, some linked to former militant or even political supply chains. We're talking AK-47s in this thing. Is this about firepower, or does it point to something deeper about security infrastructure? I'm very happy we're seeing this on the screen now. What does it say about state complicity or failure? You're saying Nigeria is a failed state, But is there a level of complicity in what we're seeing? Lagos State had 172 incidents, 197 fatalities. You'll see that of Edo and, of course, Rivers coming up. Key gangs, Aye, Eye, Buccaneers, Kesari boys, who we heard about last week in regards to Mushi, Idi Araba boys, the nature of the violence as well. So you see it in different contexts in different states. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about is people are dying. There's gang violence on the streets. Is this not just failure? Is it also a level of complicity? Or is it just us being Nigeria? I hate to ask that, but is it just Nigeria being Nigeria?
It's all of it. It's unfortunate. So take Rivers as an example. Rivers has a history of Niger Delta militancy. And as a result of that, there's a lot of loose small arms lying around. I'm sorry, I have to. You don't just call small arms lying around loose, but it's what it is. So, because of that history, think about the fact that the Sahel, when you zoom out into the security environment in the Sahel had low-level insurgencies for years.
Yes.
But after the collapse of the Gaddafi government, and suddenly weapons were available, the scale and the intensity and the level of violence in all those insurgencies experienced a dramatic uptick. So it's a similar dynamic in Rivers. Rivers had the Niger Delta militancy for years. We're talking of starting from about that towards the tail end of the 90s till the amnesty was it came about in 2010. That's a period of roughly 10 to 12 years. So there were a lot of guns already, and that in itself makes every incident more violent. Now, Lagos is Nigeria's economic capital. Lagos has there are a lot more opportunities to make basically little drops of water kind of money that adds up to a lot of money. And unfortunately, Lagos has developed a culture of informal taxation where non-state actors actually end up collecting tax on behalf of the government.
Yes.
This has been happening for going on 20 years.
It's like giving
now.
them legitimacy.
Yeah.
Exactly. So because of that, there's because there's really no accountability. We don't know for certain how much these guys collect and how much they remit to the government.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, what we do know for a fact is that they use coercion to collect a lot of these informal taxes, and that in itself is problematic.
All right, so Cheta, we're just saying in the studio that when you are back within this vicinity, you must stop by, and we have a lot to talk about in the studio. Okay, so in continuation of this conversation, just about 3 weeks ago, gunmen launched a deadly attack on the office of a vigilante outfit in River State, the Onelga Security Peace and Advisory Committee, or we call them OSPAC. So an operative of the State Intelligence Service was killed in the attack. OSPAC was set up as a vigilante group to curb gang violence. There have been police raids as well, like the ones we saw in Mushi. Now, question is, has anything worked in curbing gang violence?
Cheta is removing his glasses.
What has worked?
So what worked at first, and this was in the early 2000s, was an initial burst of a lot of violence, in return, reprisal violence from state-backed organizations. The army got involved. It worked initially, and it would have been it brought down the violence to much more manageable levels, but we messed up the aftermath as a people, and that's why it has rebounded. Now, if after all of that, that violence in the late 90s, when the army got involved, there was an incident in the federal polytechnic in Imo State, where soldiers basically came in and rounded every boy in the school. I think it was 98 or 99. Rounded up every boy, every male student, and made them, walked all of them past a bus that clearly had informants in it. The glass in all the windows in the bus were blacked out, and there was a soldier with a walkie-talkie asking questions as each boy passed. Is he among? Is he not among? Is he among? And they basically extracted all the people who were said to be involved, and that was the end. That school became peaceful for years afterwards. Now, do we have to then resort to such extreme methods? At the rate we are going, we may get to that point again, and it's not good. It's not right. But when we leave things to go out of control, you leave yourself with only the option of extreme violence to stop what is an extreme situation. So you now ask yourself, okay, after using extreme violence to curb it, the conditions that led to the rise of these groups, what are you doing to stop those conditions from rearing their heads again?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we don't do much of that.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
We
Once it's over, once it's reduced,
institutionally, we failed to master the art of winning the peace institutionally, and that's a problem. So I don't have, I hate to sound so negative, but I don't have much hope that we will solve any problems. Because when you look at the Nigerian states, one of the big problems we have now is state capacity. Have we solved any long-term problems over the past 3 decades? I struggle to find any. We specialize in the very short term, the ones that will shout, hey, everybody will gather people, everybody will clap hands and then go home. But the problem is still there. The root causes have not been addressed. And then years down the line, when the thing erupts again, we'll all be wondering, how did we get here?
Cheta, because of time, I'm going to try to combine 2 questions, and I think they're very important because many states have passed anti-cultism laws, some with harsh penalties, life imprisonment, 20 years. They address being a cult member, harboring a cult member, being aware of what cult members do, having your premises used for meetings. So there's a lot of these particular laws in Lagos, in Edo, in Rivers, in different states across Nigeria. But these laws seemingly have not made any difference. And the big question I'll ask you in just about 1 minute, if you can give us the answer, is why? And then the second thing is this. Gangs offer income, they offer identity, they offer status, they offer belonging. When you're talking about extreme poverty, these are parents who they may leave the house from morning to evening, and in the US they used to call them latchkey kids who nobody is looking after. They leave the home and you don't know who they're spending time with. You don't know who their street mentor is. When you have a situation where gangs can offer them more than their families and even society, there's no government jobs, there's no entrepreneurship, school is not a guarantee of anything. Even school is not guaranteed itself. What then are you looking at? What kind of economic model would give at-risk youth a reason to opt out of gang life? I've asked 2 questions and you have 2 minutes. One, in terms of dealing with the issue around anti-cultism laws around Nigeria. And the second one is there an economic model in which we can get these at-risk youth to say no to a life of gang activity? 2 minutes.
So second question first. I'll refer to to Tupac Shakur's song, Dear Mama. There's a part where he said, I started hanging out with dogs, and even though they sold drugs, they showed a young brother love. At the end of the day, it's sad to admit, but these gangs in many respects give disaffected youth a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. Society has to be able to replicate that. If society cannot replicate that, then we're lost. I'll give very, very quickly, I'll give an example of something that we saw in a study that we did in Badagry some years ago. A family of 4, the eldest at the time was 12. The father and the mother were working in Victoria Island. And as a result, they were working low-wage jobs in the only place they could find jobs. And as a result of that, they had no choice but they would leave the house on Monday morning, go to PI, and come back on Friday evening.
Wow.
It was the 12-year-old that was literally raising her younger ones. No parental control. Now, for the second question, which was the first question, we have Nigeria is chock full of laws. Passing laws is never our problem. It's implementation. Look at, for example, Amotekun. It's not going to be a surprise when Amotekun becomes one of these gangs because there's a law, but Amotekun is not being properly implemented. It's just all over the place and ultimately being left to its own devices. At some point, it will become a parallel state within a state, in other words, a gang. Those states passed an anti-coercion law. Now, one key official or key player within the Edo State's firmament is a chap called Tony Kabaka, and he has been alleged multiple times with a lot of credibility to be a cult member. At the very least, if you want to say that the law is going to be strong, at the very least, investigate Tony Kabaka. If you don't, then you are just wasting everybody's time, and he knows.
Okay, thank you so much, Cheta, for being a part of our conversation today on gangs and cults and everything. Thank you so much. Guys, this is where we draw the line on discussions for today. We are talking about gangs. What we're really talking about, though, is a failure of leadership, of systems, and of imagination. This crisis didn't erupt overnight. It was built slowly through silence, neglect, and the quiet complicity of those in power. So, what Cheta and the SBM reports make painfully clear is that this is no longer just a security issue. It's a structural one, and the solutions won't just come out from force alone. If we want to reclaim our cities, we must reclaim our young people, not just from violence, but from the belief that violence is the only way to be seen, to survive, to matter. I hope this conversation sparks some deep reflection. We have to leave now. Bye.
Bye.